Brendan Rodgers wake-up call. Good morning, welcome back to the channel. My name is Baz. Chris Sutton had an article today that I found was very interesting. I thought would generate some comments, this one on the channel. Chris Sutton criticises the board and the players for showing complacency, and he suggested that the attitude has seeped from the boardroom into the dressing room. And what Brendan needs to think about is the fact that he wanted a striker in the January transfer window. He wanted a striker in the summer. If you think back to last summer, the last transfer window, Brendan Rodgers said that he wanted 2 strikers brought in. And he never got one. He got one. He got Adam Ida, but he never got the second that he asked for. And then we sell Kyogo in the next window, and we still don't bring in a striker. And then he comes out with it. Oh, it's okay. We've got Dyson. It's fine. Is that covering up for the board? Chris Sutton then went on to say he believes that the decision in January not to sign a striker after selling Kyogo reflected the belief that the league was already won. That the money was in the bank, the money's coming in from the Champions League, the books are looking fine. There is a couple of things that we need to pay off, and that's all done and dusted now. So, we'll just keep the money in the bank, and the league's in the bag, basically. Brendan Rodgers' wake-up call. Brendan Rodgers was brutally honest after the loss last week to St Johnstone, calling out the lack of effort and desires from his own players. Sutton noted that the normally calm Brendan Rodgers wasn't as calm. He was quite angry. He was trying to contain his anger after the game. And his criticism, he says, Chris Sutton, is a real concern for Celtic and a real concern for fans going into this stage of the season and potentially this summer. The recent poor form, Celtic have lost 3 of the last 6 games, 4 in total since the start of the year. When you look at the fantastic form that we had at the beginning of the season, Kasper Schmeichel was unbeaten for a long, long time. Clean sheet Kasper, they were calling him at the start of the season, and now that he's out injured and Sinisalo has come in, it's not really Sinisalo's fault that we lost the games though, was it? And was it really Kasper's, or was it the lack of the new faces coming in? I mean, we brought in Jota, but then that was offset by the loss of Kyogo in the last transfer window. But the players really need to stand up and be counted. Having lost 4 since the turn of the year isn't overly alarming, let's face it. But if the league title was a lot closer, it would be. And I suggest that Celtic fans would be up in arms about it a bit more. Sutton suggests that some players may subconsciously relaxed due to the team's lead at the top of the table, and that's led to the slip-ups. And you could kind of agree with Chris Sutton on that point, because players are going into games and you go, do you know what? And this comes with the mentality of the players. And it comes from players that aren't, and I'm going to say it, Celtic-minded. You've got to have a nucleus of your team that believes. Look at the team under Brendan Rodgers before. Look at the team when Scott Brown was here. Scott Brown was a person that made sure every single player knew what it meant to play for Celtic and knew exactly what it means. And the must-win attitude every single week seems to be missing out of Nico Kuhn and maybe Yang and some of the other players, and Hatate, I would even say. But it seems to be they've just took their foot off the pedal a bit. Chris Sutton says there's that subconscious relaxed issue is in the team. There's no guarantees of success. Sutton warns against assuming that the title or the treble is secure. It's not until it's mathematically impossible for another team to get the title away from us. It is still in our hands, obviously. We only need 2 games to win it. But you don't want to be limping over the line, do you? You want to make sure that it's done and dusted in good fashion, like the way that we've done it before. And then you can bring in some of the youth players, and then you can take your foot off the pedal, which has been done many, many times at Celtic. Teams like St Johnstone, Hearts, Aberdeen could still challenge Celtic, especially in the Cup, Chris Sutton says. As for player criticism, Chris Sutton calls Nico Kuhn. He says calls out his attitude and his recent drop in form. Austin Trusty, Jeffrey Sloop. He's accused them of being too casual and lacking intensity. How do you feel about that? I think that Jeffrey Sloop came in and let's face it, anybody could have been played better than what that Greg Taylor was doing, because his mind was all over the place and thinking, I've got a kid on the way and I'm looking for a new job in the summer, a new club anyway. But Jeffrey Sloop's come in, and now there was a bit of harassing, sign on, keep him for next year, and he's on a free. But having the fact that he's on 60 grand a week, you would be expecting a little bit better player for your 60 grand a week. Just when you look at it, I mean, there's players in Scotland that are on fraction of what Jeffrey Sloop is on, and puts in more intensity into their game. And it also goes on about Austin Trusty also not having been a bit maybe in marriage mode, excited or getting married, maybe been too much for him. Anyway, he then talks about Arnie Engels and Rio Hatate. And at this point, the head dips and we all sigh. Rio Hatate, who is a fantastic player, there's no doubt in saying it. He can pick out a pass when he wants. That would be absolutely sublime at any top club in the world. But he needs to contribute more. Too many times over the past, especially since the turn of the year, too many times has Rio Hatate went missing in games, and he's woeful passing. I mean, what is going on with that? For all the plaudits that we can give Rio Hatate for being such a brilliant player, the first half of games, he seems to be passing to nobody. And the wayward passing from Rio. And then people are saying, what does Rio Hatate have to do to get taken off the pitch by Brendan Rodgers when he's having a really, really bad game? I mean, is Arnie Engels really that worse than Rio Hatate? But Chris Sutton said, look, both need to be doing and contributing more into the midfield. He does praise Daizen Maeda. He does praise Daizen Maeda for the overburdened. He feels that, praised for effort, but is overburdened due to a lack of reinforcements, which is true. Daizen takes the whole team forward. Even when he's on the wing, he pushes up and he presses and he holds the team forward. When he's playing through the middle, he pushes up and he scores fantastic goals and he leads the line and he leads the attack. But when you've not got Nick O'Connor on the side and you've got Jota showing glimpse that he's still settling in after not playing much football, I mean, you've got to give Jota... Brendan Rodgers has said this himself. He said it about Nick O'Connor. You've got to give... When players come in the January window, and they've not had the old pre-season chat from Brendan, when they've not had that at Celtic, and they're basically catching up to where the players are throughout the season. Even Jota said himself he wasn't 100% fit when he came to Celtic. But Chris Sutton says Jota has shown signs of him settling in, and there's glimpses that he can get back to the player that he was before he went on his wee holiday for 25 million that Celtic got, and he went on holiday back to Dubai in France for a year and a half, and then came back to Celtic. Woohoo! A brilliant piece of business, isn't it? But he says that Daizen Maeda is overburdened in that Celtic team, and I think he's kind of right. And during the January transfer window, Chris Sutton said the lack of January signings was described as a major misstep, and that left the squad rather stretched and lacking sharpness. The fact that we've got 6 first-team players out on loan, especially when you see some of the benches that we had to use, especially going into the later games of the Champions League, the one against Aston Villa, where we had to have pretty much 3 or 4 youth players on the bench because of injuries and the fact that, players have decided to leave the club. A lot of people are saying, look, these players aren't good enough to be at Celtic, but you still need a strong squad. Brendan Rodgers can say all he wants that he likes a trimmed down squad, but you start getting injuries. If you've not got the players in backup to step up and perform the way that the first team picks are, Anyway, Chris Sutton then goes on to say there's no excuses. Although fatigue from the European Games, the absence of the winter break are factors, Sutton says it can't be used as an excuse. Celtic have a big enough squad to rotate, but they haven't. And he ends up saying the message is to the Celtic board. Chris Sutton believes that public criticism wasn't just aimed at the players from Brendan Rodgers, but also directed at the board for setting the wrong tone. And I never thought about it like that. And Brendan Rodgers does like his little sly public digs at the board. And because I've not really been thinking about it all this week, I've never really thought about it. Tell me what you think in the comments. Is Brendan setting the tone for the summer? Get it friggin' right, or I'm buggering off a year later. I don't think that he will go this summer. I definitely think that Brendan Rodgers will be here this summer, but it is imperative, absolutely imperative, that the Celtic board play ball when it comes to the transfers. No more lackadaisical approach to the transfer window this summer. It's a massive, massive summer for Celtic because we have a Champions League qualifier. And let's face it, we haven't been too good in qualifiers in previous years. But hopefully the squad will be as strong as it can. And hopefully we'll just go out and spend some decent money on some decent reinforcements and some decent quality that's needed, much needed quality that's needed in the middle of the park. Anyway, on that note, everything will be back to normal as of this evening. Yes, the studio's getting a revamp this afternoon and everything will be back to normal. We'll be back to doing lives. Hooray, you say? Or maybe not. Anyway, on that note, have an absolutely fantastic day, Celtic fans, wherever you are. Go and get a suntan. I believe it's quite sunny back home. Anyway, have a fantastic day, you Celtic fans, wherever you are, all around the world.